Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, looked at the person sleeping right next to you, and felt like you were staring at a complete stranger? You look at their face in the dim light, and instead of the warmth you used to feel, you feel a cold, heavy ache in your chest. You realize that the magic is gone. The excitement that used to keep you up at night has completely evaporated, and in its place is a quiet, terrifying clarity. You aren't angry at them, and they haven't done anything wrong, but the lens through which you viewed them has shattered. You are finally looking at them without the filter of desire, and for the first time, you are seeing them exactly as they are. This is a profound, exhausting pain that hits millions of people, especially men who have crossed into their 30s. In your 20s, your relationships are fueled by a chaotic mix of biological drive, idealized futures, and intense infatuation. You are intoxicated by potential. But as you get older, that chemical fog begins to clear. The adrenaline of the chase fades, and you are left sitting across the table from a real, flawed human being. Our title for today captures this brutal transition. When there is no romanticism or lust, you see the reality. In this video, we are going to explore the psychological machinery that blinds us when we fall in love, and the unsettling truth that emerges when the smoke clears. We will look at why the human mind desperately needs to create illusions, how Carl Jung's concept of projection dictates our romantic lives, and what happens to a relationship when the transaction of desire stops working. More importantly, we will talk about how to survive the death of a fantasy without becoming cynical, and how to build a life based on truth rather than a temporary high. Let's begin with the moment the blindfold is ripped away, the biological blindfold. To understand why the loss of romanticism feels so shocking, we first have to understand the trick that nature plays on our minds. When you meet someone new and feel that intense spark of lust, your brain isn't operating rationally. It is flooded with a cocktail of powerful chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin. This chemical surge acts as a biological blindfold. Its entire purpose is to make you overlook red flags, ignore incompatibilities, and minimize flaws so that you stay attached to the person. During this phase, you aren't actually evaluating the other person's character. You are experiencing a state of temporary, psychological madness. If they are emotionally distant, you tell yourself they are just mysterious. If they are rude to others, you tell yourself they are just fiercely protective of you. If they lack ambition, you imagine they are a peaceful, relaxed soul. Your mind completely rewrites reality to keep the romantic narrative alive. But biology has a strict time limit. This intense, chemical high is unsustainable. It eventually burns itself out. After a year, 2 years, or sometimes even faster, the dopamine levels drop back to baseline. The music stops, the lights turn on, and the biological blindfold falls off. This is the exact moment where your true relationship begins. You are no longer intoxicated by a chemical illusion. You are forced to deal with the raw material of human nature. And for many people, that transition feels like a sudden, violent crash. Carl Jung and the psychology of projection. The legendary psychologist Carl Jung provided the deepest explanation for why we become so devastated when romanticism dies. Jung believed that the human mind is deeply terrified of its own emptiness. When we meet someone who triggers our desire, we don't actually see them. Instead, we take our own unconscious longings, our hidden needs, and our unhealed wounds, and we project them onto the other person like a movie onto a blank screen. In the context of romance, Jung called this the projection of the inner archetype. If you are a man who secretly feels chaotic and ungrounded inside, you will meet a woman who seems calm, and your mind will instantly project the image of a savior onto her. You convince yourself that she possesses the perfect, peaceful soul you lack. You aren't in love with her humanity. You are in love with the projection of peace your own mind has dressed her in. Eventually, reality arrives like a cold wind. Because no human being can carry the weight of another person's projection forever, the mask begins to slip. You notice that your savior gets petty when she's stressed. You see that she has insecurities, biases, and selfish tendencies just like everyone else. The pain you feel in that moment does not come from her behavior. It comes from the collapse of your own internal movie. You are mourning the death of an illusion that she never asked to wear in the first place. The shift from fantasy to fact. When lust and romanticism leave the room, daily life undergoes a drastic shift in perspective. Simple habits that used to feel endearing suddenly become testing points of tolerance. The way they talk, the way they handle finances, their emotional maturity, or their lack of boundaries with family Everything is dragged into the harsh light of objectivity. You stop grading them on a curve. When you are blinded by romance, every conversation feels deep because you fill in the blanks with your own imagination. But when the romance dies, you start listening strictly to the words being spoken. You notice the lack of intellectual depth, or perhaps the constant undercurrent of negativity that you were too distracted to notice before. You realize how much of your connection was built on shared physical intimacy rather than shared values. This phase exposes the true foundation of your life together. When you remove the tension and the romantic promises of tomorrow, what is left standing in the present? If a relationship was built entirely on the mutual excitement of romance, it will feel completely hollow once that excitement passes. You realize you have built a house on sand and the tide has finally come in. The glitch in the performance. Friedrich Nietzsche once remarked that many people do not love their partners. They merely love the social status or the emotional security their partners provide. When romanticism fades, you start noticing how much of human behavior is a calculated performance. When someone wants to secure your affection or your commitment, they show you their absolute best self. They perform the role of the supportive, low-maintenance, perfectly understanding partner. But a performance requires immense psychological energy. Once the initial chase is over and a sense of security sets in, the performance starts to glitch. The mask slips in tiny, quiet ways. You notice a delayed reply that feels cold rather than busy. You catch a flash of genuine envy when you succeed, disguised behind a half-hearted compliment. You see a sudden emotional withdrawal the moment you stop providing them with the specific attention or validation they want. These micro-behaviors are highly uncomfortable to witness because they force you to ask a dark question: who have I been sharing my life with? You realize that the version of this person inside your head feels significantly warmer than the actual human being sitting across from you. You begin to see that their kindness was attached to a condition, and now that the condition has changed, their true nature is bleeding through the cracks. Kindness without boundaries. One of the most painful realizations that comes with clear sight is recognizing how your own behavior has enabled your suffering. When you are deeply romantic or infatuated with someone, your natural instinct is to treat them with endless kindness, patience, and forgiveness. You want to make their life perfect because you think that will guarantee their loyalty and love. But when the fog clears, you look back at the patterns of your relationship and realize a devastating truth. Kindness without boundaries simply teaches people how to use you. When you remove the romantic excuse of loving unconditionally, you see that your constant sacrifices weren't viewed as noble acts. They were viewed as standard expectations. The person didn't value your presence. They valued your utility. You see that your willingness to overlook disrespect didn't make them respect you more. It taught them that your boundaries were flexible. You look at the history of your relationship and realize that your partner only became highly affectionate or attentive when they felt you pulling away. Their love wasn't a consistent stream. It was a reactive tool used to manage your distance and maintain control. Seeing this reality clearly forces you to stop blaming them and start auditing your own lack of self-respect. The silent social contracts. Every relationship that is built on the high of romanticism operates on an unspoken, unconscious psychological contract. These contracts are rarely spoken aloud, but they govern everything. They sound like this: I will play the role of the strong protector if you promise to never make me feel lonely. Or, I will stroke your ego constantly if you promise to give me financial and emotional stability. When the lust and the romance disappear, these contracts are suddenly brought to the surface. And when you look at them clearly, you realize they aren't based on love at all. They are transactional agreements designed to escape individual inner emptiness. The moment one person stops fulfilling their end of the transaction, whether through aging, changing interests, or emotional fatigue, the other person's behavior changes instantly. This explains why people can seem to transform into completely different human beings overnight during a breakup or a major life pivot. They didn't change overnight. The contract simply expired, and the mask was no longer necessary. They stopped pretending to care about your day, your feelings, or your future because you are no longer serving the psychological purpose they hired you for. The isolation of clarity. Stepping out of the romantic illusion gives you immense mental sovereignty, but it also carries a strange, heavy punishment. When you stop romanticizing people, you become incredibly hard to manipulate. You see through the charm, you see through the transactional affection, and you see through the polite deceptions that keep social life moving smoothly. But this clarity can make the world feel remarkably lonely. You look around at your friends, your family, or society at large, and you see how much of human connection relies on collective sleepwalking. You see couples holding hands who are completely disconnected emotionally, surviving entirely on denial and shared bills. You see people performing happiness on social media to convince themselves that their superficial choices were correct. You realize that most social systems are not built on truth. They are built on a mutual agreement to ignore what everyone secretly sees. When you refuse to play that game anymore, your presence can make people deeply uncomfortable. Genuinely aware people expose the performances of those around them simply by existing. When you stop feeding the emotional games, when you stop chasing approval, and when you react to consistent patterns rather than empty words, the people who relied on your old, naive self will start backing away. They will call you cold, distant, or cynical. But you aren't cynical. You are just finally awake, embracing the reality. The death of romance is not something to be feared or avoided. It is a necessary, albeit painful, rite of passage for anyone who wants to live an authentic life. Carl Jung famously wrote that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The breaking of the illusion is the only thing that can save you from spending your entire life chasing ghosts and loving shadows. When you can look at the person in your life without the filter of lust, and you still choose to stand by them, that is where real love actually has a chance to begin. Real love isn't a chemical high. It is an objective, conscious choice. It is looking at someone's flaws, their shadow, and their limitations, and saying, I see exactly who you are, without the fantasy, and I still choose to build a reality with you. And if you look at them and realize there is nothing left once the fantasy is gone, that realization is your ticket to freedom. It allows you to stop wasting your vital psychic energy on a relationship that only exists inside your own head. You stop begging reality to be softer than it is. You walk away with your eyes wide open, harder to fool, deeper in your understanding, and completely sovereign in your own skin. If this exploration of reality and illusion made you look at your own life differently, let me know that you crossed the finish line of this video. Leave a comment below with the word aware. Let it be a sign that you are done loving illusions. Keep your focus sharp, protect your boundaries, and stay grounded in what is real. I will see you in the next video.